Mine's also about food.
I'm refuting the topic about America's modern diet. My opponent's claim is that sugar is more harmful to the body than fat. Their secondary claims were: 1, humans evolved eating fat and protein, thus our bodies are not made efficient in processing sugar. 2, controlling fat intake fails to produce health benefits and leads to increased sugar intake. And 3, carbohydrate-based diets lead to overeating. I'm going to start by responding to their first claim, which is humans evolved eating fats and protein, and so our bodies are not efficient in processing sugar. My stand is that our body is efficient at processing sugar because we need it, and we have needed it since the beginning. Carbs and sugars are the body's main source of energy, unlike fats that are stored until we need it. And Dr. Erica Gebel of the American Diabetes Association writes that fat from food is broken down to fatty acids and captured by hungry cells, but remaining fatty acids are bundled in triglycerides and stored in fat cells, which have an unlimited capacity. Carbohydrates, on the other hand, have can be stored with a limited capacity. My opponent goes on talking about some history about human evolution with a piece of evidence from the National Science Foundation stating that humans have survived mostly on animal fats and proteins since the beginning of our existence, and that recently we've been supplementing carbohydrates and sugars into our diet. Humans evolved eating protein. We also ate a lot of carbohydrates. My opponent says as well that fiber is a carbohydrate in which the body cannot digest. He suggested earlier that we evolved in a way that our body is inefficient at digesting sugars. How did foods in the beginning provide less carbohydrates and sugars? There was no evidence. From my understanding, the renowned paleo diet or the caveman diet is a high protein and high fiber plan that promises you can lose weight without cutting calories. It's taken from WebMD online. The diet includes only foods that were available in the era, such as lean meats, fish, vegetables, fruits. Half of these include carbohydrates and sugars. In moderate quantities, carbs and sugars are healthy, and even if someone was to exceed their daily value, it is not immediately stored as fat. According to Livestrong Foundation, your body needs carbohydrates more than any other nutrient. And eating a diet composed of 40 to 60% carbs helps ensure positive energy levels, exercise performance, moods, and overall function. My opponent's next secondary claim is that controlling fat intake fails to produce health benefits and leads to increased sugar intake. His evidence to support this is a study done in the 70s where one concluded that animal fats contain cholesterol and the other that high cholesterol leads to heart disease. He said that no study has been done that links those two together. Not all cholesterol is unhealthy. A recent release by the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee in the Washington Post warns about high levels of bad cholesterol in the blood, which have been linked to heart disease. There are two types of cholesterol. There's HDLs and LDLs, and the former being the healthy and artery cleaning kind. Excuse me. My opponent's evidence was misleading. Moreover, some experts in this committee warn that people with particular health problems, such as diabetes, should continue to avoid cholesterol-rich diets. My opponent's third claim is that the carbohydrate-based diets lead to overeating, which is unhealthy. The problem with this is that it's opinion, and I see no supporting evidence to go along with it. Depending on the food, carbohydrate-dense meals don't have the tendency to make you feel as full as other foods of that same quantity. And this seems to be a frequent problem with the paleo diet I talked about earlier. Carbs, like grains, are dried out and have little water weight, and this means they're packed with a lot of calories in a small amount of space. This is how my opponent reasoned with the Applebee's example of getting full on a steak and not so much the pasta dish. On paleoleap.com, scientists say that when you switch to the paleo diet, you'll have to revise your mental estimation of a normal plate full of food. In conclusion, my opponent argued that sugar is more harmful to the body than fat. In fact, this isn't always true. The human body is efficient at processing sugars because we have always needed it, and since the beginning of our existence. Humans evolved eating protein and a lot of carbs, as we see in the paleo diet, and not all cholesterol is unhealthy for us. My opponent's main claim does not necessarily work for everyone. and there are many cases in which carbohydrates are actually beneficial. I argued how our evolution in fact consists in simple carbohydrates or sugars, how one type of cholesterol is linked to heart disease, and the reason carbs often don't make us feel full.
All right, well, the structural stuff is fine. The information about carbs and sugars that you go through on the first point, basically you come down to equivocating carbs and sugars and suggesting that they are the same kind of thing. So that's where the argument's going to be. Are diets lower in carbs safer than diets high in fats? It seems that the advocate is saying that that is in fact the case. I think there's a lot to argue about here, but sometimes I just get a summary of what people think about these ideas and concepts without the follow-up argument that shows that one point of view is right and the other one is wrong. I'm getting a description of a lot of the theories on these points, but I don't know that you're always taking a position on these issues. I thought at the end of the speech in your summary it sounded like you were taking more position than you were in the body of the arguments, because you frequently, like I said, just describe a lot of things that are going on without telling us how we're supposed to treat this. The paleo diet that you make reference to, I assume, is high in fats and low in carbs. I didn't hear any argument that says that it works or that it doesn't work. So now I've got this information. How am I supposed to use this? The evidence that talked from Live Strong that said 40 to 60% of the diet needs to come from carbohydrates in order for us to have sufficient energy. That was the thing that was probably the clearest piece of information in the argument and the one that most directly applies to the issues that are being presented. Everything else just feels like I'm in the vicinity and I'm waiting for an inference, and I'm not getting it very frequently. The distinction between the good and the bad HDL and LDL, well, how is that applicable? In essence, especially when it comes to the sugar issue, do people who consume more sugar have higher HDL or higher LDL? And as a consequence, does that mean that it's more dangerous or less dangerous? I don't really get an explanation of that. I just get an explanation about these two different kinds. And you suggest that the advocate's evidence is misleading, but I'm not exactly sure what inference the advocate made using this kind of information and what argument you're making with this information. I'm just getting data without, like I said, a very clear explanation about what the declarative conclusion is on this. So I'm not saying that there aren't declarative conclusions that are possible. I'm just saying I'm having a hard time finding them in the speech that you're presenting. I like there's a variety of information, and I think you find a lot of issues that really do require some analysis, and there is some application to these arguments, but you need to pull the trigger and sometimes say, this is why the argument that the advocate presented is inaccurate, or this is why it is safer to consume fats or sugars than it is to consume fats. And I just don't get those kinds of claims. This is one of the things that we talked about the first night in class. You need declarative statements so that people know what the argument is and what your position is. And I'm getting a lot of expository information here. All right, thank you.